Hello and welcome to Live Now, the info show for technology and trends. My name is Ben Friedman and we are lucky enough to be here today in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona at the Wireless LAN Conference 2020 here in Phoenix for the last 2 or 3 years, and we're very lucky to be joined today by none other than the show founder himself, Keith Parsons. Keith, thank you so much for joining us here.
Very glad to be here.
So it's actually been about a year since we were last here. We had an interview with you last year this time. Here we are, we're in a different hotel this year. What has changed?
We kind of maxed out the last hotel. We couldn't add any more attendees, so we hunted around. We actually tried to find within a day's drive of Phoenix, because all our gear's here, and ended up finding this hotel is still in Phoenix, and larger, more swimming pools, a lazy river, better rooms, and the conference hall is large enough to allow us to grow into it.
And I'm sure the question on everyone's mind is, how's the Wi-Fi here?
That's a delicate question. It's okay.
Wait, when you're a Wi-Fi guy and you have to come to a hotel, is that like the #1 consideration, or do you want to set?
No.
Do you set up your own network? What do you do?
So we've thought about doing that, but with our audience, no matter how good we did it, they would always have complaints. So we just use the hotel's network, and it's okay.
So you've got, how many people here? 300, 350?
About 350, yeah.
And they're all, a lot of them using the hotel Wi-Fi. And these are heavy Wi-Fi users, probably 2 or 3 devices each. Has it been reasonable? Would this be a hotel that you might have done the installation for, the site survey for?
I could have, I didn't. It would have, just the cocky side of me said it would have been better.
Well, that goes without saying.
But
no doubt.
There's some things with public Wi-Fi, whether it be hotels or large public venues. You have to think, what are the requirements that they need? And this place was more about the financial side, that it's a money-making opportunity for a hotel, and that's what their business is. They didn't really make it, I like fast, free, and frictionless, to be as fast as possible. One of the features with Wi-Fi, in the thing you have least of, is something called airtime, that you want to have certain frequencies to play with. And so one of the things that a lot of people who come from the route switch side, or in this case the hotel Wi-Fi, is that if I limit one person, then they're not going to steal from someone else. It's kind of we have a limited resource, which is how much bandwidth I give you. And then we want to divvy it up so you can only have a little bit. But in Wi-Fi, the thing we have least of is radio frequency. And so to save radio frequency...
is that a capacity issue rather than bandwidth? It's number of people?
It's not even number of people. It's to make it as efficient as possible. I want you to talk as fast as you can. You'll lose a little bit of time, and then we can have more people in. So capacity in Wi-Fi isn't the same calculation as capacity on, say, an Ethernet cable. What we need is airtime back. And so instead of limiting you to only use 10 meg, if I give you 1 gig, you will get off 100 times faster, which will give back the airtime for someone else. So capacity is about airtime, it's not about limiting someone. And that's a hard concept to share with some people.
Now, I don't want to keep harping on the hotel because it's a beautiful property. We're at the Hilton Point Squaw Peak here in North Phoenix, which is delightful.
Oh, and people love it. Teams go running up the mountains in the day, lots of places to play.
And as you say, they have a lazy river, which is generally like my #1,
that's right. I choose that.
For a
and
hotel.
for the yoga people, they have a really nice yoga studio, so it's got a lot of good things going for it.
One thing that I know you are very big on is the idea that Wi-Fi should be a commodity like towels and sheets and whatever.
And electricity.
And electricity. You don't pay extra for electricity at a hotel. It comes free with your room. You get electricity. Some hotels feel that it should be an add-on. You open up your captive portal and it says click here and we'll charge you $14.95 a day for Wi-Fi. And from the hotel's point of view, I guess it's a service like parking. I think parking should come free with every hotel, but it doesn't.
For many hotels it does. And
many hotels
it's whether or not it's a differentiator. And you would never expect someone to say, oh, you want a clean towel? We'll pay you. You can reuse your same towel, but if you want a clean one, that's $14.95 more.
That'd be crazy.
That'd be crazy.
Right.
And yet they do the same thing with Wi-Fi. My suggestion is because some Wi-Fi salesmen sold it to them. It's not like they're out there saying, oh, we should do this. Some salesmen went, hey, we found a way you can make more money.
But some people have breakfast included.
Mm-hmm.
Some places you pay extra for breakfast. Same thing with spa, same thing with parking, as I said. First of all, where did the Hilton fall down upon this? Sometimes I find, especially with Hilton properties, it's like halfway. If you've got a Hilton number, then you can get it for free. If you don't have a Hilton number, so they're not using it necessarily for money.
So
they're using it to
this hotel is
build up their
everyone
mailing
is
list.
free, but if you have a Hilton number, your Hilton H Honors member, you get faster access. So they're trying to say everyone can get it for free, but you get special access.
So that's sort of like everyone getting the continental breakfast for free, but if you want bacon and eggs, you pay extra. Where does
my example is more, everyone gets a towel, but no washcloth and no sheets. But if you're then you get sheets.
Yeah.
See, I think it's a base, just like you need air conditioning in your room and you need electricity.
So where do you fall down on the multiple tier then? Are you against that as well? Or
You don't multiple tier your towels.
You don't multiple tier your towels.
You
That's
don't
true.
charge someone extra. If you want to charge your phone and an iPad, that's an extra charge.
I think we're all pretty clear on where you come down on that, and I think that's I mean, that's a reasonable way to be. And I think as time goes by, that fewer and fewer places will be able to charge for it.
And that's what we've seen over the last 20 years. It used to be everyone charged because it was a way to make money. And really the history
and maybe
of it,
recoup money because those hotels back then had to retrofit to put in the.
But the actual cost of putting access points and Wi-Fi in a hotel is fairly low compared to other. I mean, putting an escalator costs more.
Wow.
So as a cost benefit, but the history was, we used to, and hotels used to make a lot of money on long distance phone calls.
Right, that's true.
And so they lost that revenue. They used to make money on selling movies.
And everyone brings their iPad now.
Yeah, and so the places where they had this little bit of extra income went away because technology. They were trying to recoup some of that by selling something else.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, I could talk hotels all day long, but let's
get off hotels.
Let's get back into some Wi-Fi talk here. I think one of the big things you and I talked about last year was Wi-Fi 6, and it was just around the corner. Is it here now? Am I using Wi-Fi 6 and not even realizing it?
It's still here. It's also around the corner. It's a little both. We're right on the transition.
Are we at the corner? We're at the cusp, would you say?
Well, so my iPhone 11?
Yes.
Wi-Fi 6.
Okay.
So I have Wi-Fi 6, but the AP that I'm connected to right now doesn't. So it's okay to have a transition for a while where some of the devices are and some aren't. It's not you have to have it to move forward.
Right, it's backwards compatible.
About every vendor today has a Wi-Fi 6 offering that you could take. If my recommendation to my customers is, if today you're going to be upgrading, your old equipment is end of life, 100% choose Wi-Fi 6. If you have Wi-Fi 5, and those are marketing terms, in technology we call it 802.11ac Wi-Fi 5, 802.11ax Wi-Fi 6. If you already have a decent working system and it's not time to upgrade, there's not a huge differential to make that happen yet. But over time, what we've seen since the first iPhone came out is there's an adoption cycle that end users have, that they pick up a new iPhone every X number of years, and it takes a while for the new technology to get into the masses. And once it hits some critical mass, 50, 60%, then the new infrastructure gives you back all those extra benefits.
Right.
So every one of these, if you said, are we in, where we're in the phase, it's an adoption curve. We're someplace on the adoption curve.
Well, and to that point, if you're using Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi AC, and you're a hotel, you're a stadium, you're a whatever, you're a store, is Wi-Fi 6 enough of a reason to upgrade? It's like if you have an iPhone 10, is the iPhone 11 enough of a reason to upgrade, or are you going to keep that for 3 or 4 years?
I would say if you are ready to upgrade, your old gear is end of life or something, maybe. But there's not enough differential for each phase to justify a rip and replace.
Right. So no one's going to say, because of Wi-Fi 6, I'm going to rip and replace.
Well, some people will say that.
Salespeople will say that.
Salespeople, the people who get paid for doing that, and that's continually one of our talks today was about our industry. Our industry currently is chasing curves. We had the first technology and another one comes, and we have to deal with that continual change.
Right.
So salespeople are like, we have to have something new to talk about. They couldn't say, for the next 2 years we're just going to be nothing. But on the receiving side, you're a customer. You can go 2, 3, 4 years with the old technology and be fine.
Right.
So it's where you are in the curve. I think for people who understand the curve, we've jumped the chasm.
Is anyone going to walk into the Gap or walk into the hotel and think, oh, look, Wi-Fi 6? It's invisible, really, right? Isn't it?
But some, like if you look on your AT&T phone,
yeah,
it has a 6 on there.
Oh.
Or they went 5, like we're going to 5G, but they put a 5E. 5E. So they didn't want to actually not tell the truth, but they wanted to entice.
Well, speaking of E's, another thing that I've heard tossed around that I have no idea what it is, but maybe you can explain it to me and anyone else who hasn't heard of it, is Wi-Fi 6E.
Oh, that's an easy one to explain.
Okay.
And I think it's a difficult thing to market now that they've said, the Wi-Fi Alliance said, we're going to call this new thing 6E. It's Wi-Fi 6, 802.11ax technology, but in the 6 gigahertz range. We currently don't have legal right to transmit in 6 gigahertz. We transmit in 2.4, we transmit in 5 gig, but 6 gig is assigned to someone else by the FCC and internationally all over. But the current chairman of the FCC and a whole bunch of people are working to open up that 6 gigahertz. It's over 1.2 gigahertz of frequency. That's a ton of area that we could really grow into. It's not legal to be there today. But the Wi-Fi Alliance was saying, well, we have Wi-Fi 6. What do we call it when we move to this 6 gig? Well, since we called it Wi-Fi 6, we can't call it Wi-Fi 6.
You can't call it 6G.
Yeah,
because that sounds like cellular.
That sounds like cellular. So you could call it 6.6. Then it's like
now
Route
it's the
66.
devil.
Yeah, that would be one more 6. And so they said 6E for enhanced, extended, something like
6E
that.
6E enhanced. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so today you can't buy handsets or access points or
but
even
there's a standard.
test gear.
That the idea is let's create the standard so that if the FCC guy and I assume like the Alliance, do they lobby the FCC on that behalf?
They lobby, vendors are lobbying.
Right.
Every vendor is pushing for it because that chunk of frequency will give us huge amounts of speed and solve all sorts of problems. So it is coming, and they're just kind of ahead of the curve saying, if you think of adoption curves, they're not even on the early adopter part yet. But they're just saying, we see that coming, so let's give it a name and we can talk about it rather than say Wi-Fi in 6 gig. That's a long thing to say.
I never talk to you without learning something new. It's fantastic. Let's get back to the show for a moment.
Okay. We're here.
Here we are.
Yeah.
The first one, was it 2014? The first Wireless LAN Professional Conference?
I forget the dates, but yeah, we had one in Austin.
The first
Dallas,
one was the one in Austin because we were there in Austin, and now here we are in 2020. So 6 years, more than 6 shows, because of course you do a European version of this show. You've done some Latin American ones. There are other places I know you're looking to expand. What would you say is the biggest difference that you've seen in the show? I know there was only 100 or so people there. Now there's triple that here.
Actually, 4 times. So
there you go.
Which is nice.
It is definitely good. You've
like
had some great validation. The show's grown. There's obviously a need. But how are things? What's the biggest change? What's the biggest difference from 2014 to now?
Probably in that we have not just more people. That's an easy answer. That we have more. It's the mix. It was in the original. I probably of the first 80 people who showed up. I knew most of them by name.
Right.
They were friends. There were people I knew on social media. Now I look out and I still know that percentage, but there's a whole bunch of other people that are new to the industry that want to get in. And the comforting, I don't know if comforting is the right word. The nice part of it is the community is welcoming. Just one example that I've seen multiple times. People be standing around, in some evening event, talking in a circle, and a new person comes in, and they just open the circle up and let them in.
Wow, that's great.
As they should, but it's nice. It's nice to see that they're welcoming to add more people. People who were afraid to even attend and talk to anyone are now presenting.
And the demographic, has it changed? Has this become more of a less of a what am I trying to say? Less of a specialty, more of something where there's more diverse people coming in from different groups, as opposed to it being a very narrow segment.
Since we offer them in other countries, we don't get a lot of Europeans come to the U.S. They kind of stay there, but a lot of people from South America come up. We tried one Latin America one out of the 6 we've held in the U.S. And so there's a market down there. We do have a lot coming up from Latin America here. We have international people from all over attend, and we're trying to get the conference and this experience to more people in more places.
Keith, that just about wraps it up for us. First of all, thank you so much once again for joining us here. And I have a little surprise. We actually dug up from 2014 a little marketing piece that we made for you back
remember,
then.
Yes,
Yeah, this little
Sights and Sounds.
Sights and Sounds video. We dug that up, and so we're going to roll it here in a minute. You'll be able to see some very young faces that a lot of people, I'm sure, will remember. And then we'll be back right after that with a lot more from Live Now. But let's take a quick look at that little piece of memorabilia right now.
I'm Keith Parsons, and this conference is called Wireless LAN Professionals Summit 2014. We're here with about 115 other wireless professionals, and the idea is just to get a conference for people who use Wi-Fi stuff, by people who use Wi-Fi stuff. We just get them all together and talk tech.
I would say the quality of the education has, surpassed my expectations by a mile. So it's been, I thought it's going to be good, but it's been fantastic. Probably the best content I've ever seen in a conference.
Yeah, the education's been great. To get a real-world experience and first-hand information from professionals has been really valuable.
To be a professional in your career, you need to have the right tools. So part of the attendee bag includes the tools you need: spectrum analyzers, packet analyzers, software and hardware you need to do your job correctly. So we included those in the attendee bag.
The attendee bag was amazing. Tons of tools, access points from various vendors that we can try and experiment with, put in our labs.
And then we also got a bunch of tools that we would use on our day-to-day jobs, such as OmniPeak from Wild Packets. We got IPA from the great guys over at MetaGeek, and we got Ekahau Site Survey. So there's a lot of great tools that we should be using in our day-to-day jobs.
Because wireless is such a small industry and everyone is so spread out, gathering in one place and meeting everyone, hanging out all day, learning, and then socializing at night, it's a lot of fun, and it really helps bring the community together.
Well, the networking is always the most important to me. I love to meet new people and hear different ideas.
I think it was all about knowledge. I don't think it was about beating each other up or saying this vendor is better than that vendor. I think it was about a sharing of knowledge for the betterment of the industry, and that was very important. It has been very important so far.
I feel really bad for the people who couldn't make it to the conference this year. We had a limited number of seats available, and they sold out within 2 weeks.
If you didn't come this year, I would highly recommend you coming next year, because the wireless LAN industry is really such a small, tight-knit community, and we really have no other big events to really kind of come together as a community.
If you weren't able to make it this year, what's wrong with you? And if you're planning on getting here next year, or you're thinking about getting here, I can't think of any better way to learn or advance yourself in the wireless industry.
If part of your job is dealing with wireless networks, this is the conference you need to attend.
Hello and welcome to Live Now, the info show for trends and technology. We are here in beautiful, sunny Phoenix, Arizona at the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference 2020, and it's absolutely wonderful here. It's February, but it's like 75 degrees out. People could not be happier. And we are lucky enough today to be joined by Andrew Van Nage from Salona, a brand new, fairly new company, I think, there, and that I wasn't too aware of until about 8 months or a year or so ago. I saw my first thing about Salona. First of all, Andrew, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
I know that Salona plays in the CBRS space. This was a term that I was not really familiar with until I think a Tech Field Day where we saw this on there. For anyone else who isn't familiar with CBRS, why don't you give us the quick rundown on what CBRS is and what Salona does?
Yeah, absolutely. So CBRS stands for Citizens Broadband Radio Service. So it's
like CB? like Breaker 19?
No,
Not that kind of
despite the
citizen.
name, it's not two-way radio type of functionality. It's new spectrum band in the 3.55 to 3.7 gigahertz range that was opened up just late last year by the FCC, and full commercial availability starting this year, just this last month in January of 2020. And what it is it's a new spectrum band for mobile broadband services, meaning LTE and 5G. And one of the big aspects of it is that it's not licensed spectrum. And it's also not unlicensed spectrum either. It's a hybrid in between, what they call shared spectrum. And this allows enterprises potentially to deploy cellular networks that they own and control, as opposed to the traditional cellular networks deployed by carriers and mobile network operators.
So does this kind of do for cell networks what 2.4 gig originally did for Wi-Fi, where all of a sudden anyone can do 2.4 gig, anyone can bring out a router, and all of a sudden there's an explosion of 2.4 gig wired data devices?
Right. When the FCC opened up 2.4 gigahertz, I mean, it created like this explosion of innovation in unlicensed spectrum. And CBRS, with the shared spectrum model, is actually termed or coined by the FCC the innovation band. The FCC is trying to replicate what it's been able to do and the success it's had with other spectrum initiatives of opening it up for broader use cases to enable the market to go and innovate and develop solutions that really solve today's needs.
So we're here at the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference in Phoenix. Most of the people here, I get the impression, are Wi-Fi people. They're not necessarily LTE or carrier people, even though wireless does encompass both of those. It's a Wi-Fi conference. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree. This is really a Wi-Fi conference for Wi-Fi professionals.
Right. So what would you say are maybe the top 3 things that a Wi-Fi professional or a wireless installer needs to know about this new band that's coming up?
Yeah, what I would say is, the first thing that Wi-Fi professionals should know is that this new spectrum with CBRS is a shared spectrum model, and it really is a hybrid between licensed and unlicensed technology. So it really provides the opportunity for clean spectrum that is only lightly used by incumbents today, mainly Federal Navy radar off the coasts and a few fixed satellite service companies. But by and large, it's unused across most of the land mass of the US. So it offers an avenue for enterprises to deploy their own private LTE networks that they fully own and control. They can integrate seamlessly with their existing network infrastructure to provide a cost-effective means of adoption for this new technology, and it really leverage it to solve business challenges that they've had and potentially weren't able to solve, or new business initiatives that they're looking at extending into.
Right, and I know I think I saw there was a decision just like in January about opening up some of this space. We're only in mid-February now. What went on in January there?
Yeah, so January was the culmination of about several years worth of work from the FCC and the business alliances with the WIN Forum that does standard specification for CBRS, and the CBRS Alliance, which is more the marketing commercialization aspect. And so the process culminated in January of 2020 with full commercial availability of the spectrum, because it had been in what they called an initial commercial deployment, which was just test and evaluation to see how it goes, to test the new systems and the new protocols and components that go into managing this shared spectrum between different parties, being incumbents with like the Federal Navy and Department of Defense that need to be protected when they are using the spectrum. There's going to be a priority access license for folks to actually get priority access to some slices of the spectrum. And then there's going to be general authorized access, which is the third tier, which is really anybody can use it as long as they meet the FCC's rules.
So general access, you don't even have to apply for that. You don't need. There's no. You don't need a grant of any kind from the FCC or the standards body. You can literally just build a device and market it.
Correct. So manufacturers like the company I'm at with Solona, we manufacture network infrastructure, and there are other manufacturers in this industry.
Right.
Manufacture equipment and the software and protocols to integrate with what they call spectrum access system vendors, and there's 5 large vendors that maintain a database on the back end of who's using what spectrum where. And essentially, as long as you pass FCC certification and meet the rules and integrate with these SaaS vendors, you can deploy a private LTE network in CBRS band and comply with all the federal rules. So you don't have to pay for licensed spectrum. All you have to do is buy a private network that you deploy and control yourself.
Wow, and so is Solona one of the priority tier levels, or I assume the incumbents, you talk about like the Navy, which, does that mean if you happen to be near an air base of some kind, there's circles of areas where these can't be used?
Yeah, so tier 1 with the incumbents is it's mainly around 17 shipborne radar systems, mainly on aircraft carriers.
And they move?
They move.
So
they're in the oceans, they come potentially along the coast, and there's 3 main sites that are potentially impacted the most.
Right.
Norfolk, Virginia, San Diego, and Seattle, where there's large, obviously, Navy bases.
And forgive my ignorance, if somebody near there wanted to install a system like this, would you recommend them against it, or is it?
No, it's just a matter of planning and design. They can still deploy a CBRS network. The spectrum band itself is 150 megahertz wide. It's anticipated that any aircraft carrier will only use a very small slice of that spectrum, and so when they come into the port or the naval base, and potentially radios in that area are impacted, they just need to not operate on the same 5 megahertz small section that aircraft carrier is using. But they can use the rest of the band.
Oh, okay. So I know you gave a big training yesterday, a big deep dive as it's called here at the Wireless LAN conference, which is probably good because again, I'm sure a lot of these people, this is something that's fairly new to them. What would you say are the big takeaways from your training? And first of all, I know everything here has been recorded. Are you guys going to make the training public as well?
Yeah, I believe we're going to be making the training public. There's a huge demand. I think the biggest takeaway for me from the training session we had here was there's a large amount of high level of engagement from all these Wi-Fi professionals. They understand that wireless in the enterprise environment is expanding beyond just Wi-Fi, and this really provides a lot of potential, and they're eager to learn about LTE and 5G and its applications to enterprises and to get ahead of the curve. The other thing is that spectrum sharing is new, and the mechanics of SAS integration and operation, we're still very much in the early days. So all of this has been defined. The FCC has tested it to their liking. Now we're starting to see commercial deployments, and we'll continue to deploy and learn from those to refine exactly how enterprises need to deploy this technology. And then I would say the last takeaway from the training session is that LTE is new to a lot of people. It's no longer confined to just engineers in the carrier and mobile network operator space. So it's becoming approachable to a much wider audience. Traditionally, most of these folks are familiar with Wi-Fi, it's been very approachable as a consumer technology.
Right.
Cellular, people are familiar with it from,
they use it.
From a consumer handset perspective,
right.
But nobody except for carriers has deployed these networks. So it's very new, and so there'll be high demand for training and training content and certification for these engineers to learn about these technologies with LTE and 5G, and to be able to design and deploy these networks because it's commercially available today and these networks are coming.
So let's talk about that then. Obviously there's a ton of Wi-Fi hardware out there, there's a ton of LTE hardware. What sort of hardware do you need to use this? Is it, and I'm going to take a leap here, I'm again fairly ignorant to these sort of things, but I assume the easiest thing to do is to bridge it. So you've got this, your network, your CBRE network, you have some sort of bridge over to Wi-Fi, and then you use the Wi-Fi and and backhaul it on the CBRE network. But without that, do you need some CBRE native devices?
Yeah, so...
or do all LTE devices talk on CBRE?
So the great thing about CBRS as a spectrum band...
excuse me.
No worries. CBRS as a spectrum band is just another band defined by the 3GPP, which is the standards body for LTE. And so every LTE chipset that ships from Qualcomm starting late last year actually includes support for the CBRS spectrum band.
So if you've got an iPhone 11, it can do CBRS.
Yeah, so there's already devices, a pretty robust ecosystem, and it's only going to grow larger. We've already got iPhone 11s, Google Pixel 3 and 4s, Samsung S10s, Note 10s, a large amount of tablets and Cradle Point routers and gateways and Sierra bridges and things like that. So there's a lot of devices in the ecosystem already, but over the next 12 months we'll see just a flood of those devices, because every device that comes out and supports LTE will support CBRS natively. And so the access onto the network will be end user devices or business solution embedded devices connecting directly to a CBRS network. No bridge over to Wi-Fi or anything like that. It's just going to be a complementary network to solve different use cases in the enterprise that are maybe potentially more mission critical and have higher SLA requirements for predictable performance.
So probably not like an IoT play.
IoT is actually one of the large applications for LTE and 5G.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so very low power devices or low data bandwidth devices, but they're very critical that they get their communications through. And the other aspect to IoT is just the device density. So there's a large amount of devices, sensors for smart buildings or things of that nature, in universities for precision agriculture and things like that for research. The amount of sensors that are potentially going to be deployed are just thousands potentially of devices per square kilometer. So people are looking for solutions like LTE that can handle that device density.
I'm just thinking about devices that traditionally don't have 4G or LTE access, but do have Wi-Fi access, like printers, for example, things like that. Maybe some sort of servers or what have you that you need. Even laptops today, I think it's a minority that would have an LTE chip inside them.
Yeah, I think right now you do definitely see a divided market of Wi-Fi only devices and devices that are geared toward LTE.
Right.
I think just like anything else, we're going to see a blending of the two.
Really, LTE has been about portability. The smaller the device, the more likely it has an LTE chip. Like an iPad or a phone is likely to have 4G or something, but a larger laptop or, as I say, a printer, something that isn't mobile.
Right.
Generally, they just stick Wi-Fi in.
Yeah, I think it's been two things about economics of the two different markets.
Right.
Because traditional carriers, you have to have a data plan and it's a subscription-based service, whereas Wi-Fi is you can deploy it yourself and there's no kind of ongoing subscription cost. Once you've deployed it, you can leverage it for private business use. And so now that we see, I think, use cases coming in for private LTE in an enterprise setting, the device ecosystem is starting to merge. That a lot of these devices that have traditionally been Wi-Fi only, we're going to see bundled with LTE and cellular chipsets for the private networks. And then the cost of LTE has come down quite a bit as well. It used to be LTE chipsets were quite a price premium just to embed in the devices themselves. So the price of the device would be much higher potentially if you embedded LTE in it. Those chipset costs have come down. They're not to the same price point as Wi-Fi chipsets at this point, but they're much more comparable. So we're going to see the market economics change so that those devices are going to proliferate with LTE.
Now, two places where I know people complain a lot about 4G current or even current LTE access are things like indoors in buildings where sometimes you can't get good cell access, and also at large venues, the stadiums and such, where perhaps the 4G band is saturated. Are either of those two cases a good use case for something like this?
Yeah, depending on the application. So indoors definitely, because there is a large potential gap in macro carrier coverage indoors for cellular. And so there are opportunities for what we call neutral host or roaming agreements with carriers to augment their networks by deploying private networks indoors, owned and operated by an enterprise or a managed service provider, and selling access to that indoor network back to the carrier so they can augment their coverage. Just like today, carriers go into certain locations and put in DAS systems for their own networks, but it costs a lot of money. So potentially this is one avenue to explore for indoors. For outdoors, like stadiums and things like that, some of those use cases could be back office type applications, maybe not the fan direct access that might stay on carrier or Wi-Fi, but for point of sale and ticket scanners and those back office type of applications in those environments where they want to get it away potentially from the congestion on the Wi-Fi or on the public cellular network, those would be great use cases.
So for engineers who are watching this or people who are in the field, how would you say people should best go out and maybe educate themselves a little bit more? Where can we send people?
Yeah, starting points to learn about CBRS and LTE. I think on the CBRS side, you start with the organizations that are leading the charge on developing those solutions. So that's the WIN Forum. On their website, there's a large amount of resources on the standards that they're developing for the spectrum and how that works. The other one is the CBRS Alliance, which I mentioned earlier. They're more the commercialization arm. They're the business alliance, developing business use cases and how the technology can be used. And they're also the ones leading the charge on adapting the LTE standards into this new spectrum band, because some of the use cases are fairly unique and they need some extension or changes to LTE in order to make that work for the new business use cases. For LTE, it's a little bit different. There are some good introductory materials that are free out there on the internet, such as one I would recommend is an Alcatel-Lucent white paper on LTE network architecture. It's a great introductory white paper.
A little light reading?
A little light reading. It's definitely not as deep as most of the standard specifications, so it's approachable, let's say. Other options are really in print material. There's a lot of books available for purchase that include like LTE and Bullets is a good book, EPC and 4G Packet Networks is a good introductory book. And finally, I'd say on the analyst side, there's a good assessment of the private LTE market and value proposition by Dean Bubley from Disruptive Analysis. He actually partnered with one of the software solution providers in the space, IBWave, and they published an ebook around private LTE. So definitely go check that out on IBWave's site.
Fantastic. So lastly, let's wrap this up. I want to talk a little bit about you.
Yeah.
I met you years and years ago. I think you were about 12 at AeroHive, which was sort of a startup at the time, and then grew, went public, and then ended up getting bought out by Extreme. And now you're with Solona, which is like another startup, I guess.
Yeah.
Are you a startup-aholic?
Well, I'm from the Midwest, so I'm not definitely deep into the startup culture, but I do like exciting new challenges and building new solutions that solve problems. So that happened for me back in the day with AeroHive and with the Wi-Fi community and solutions out there. Took a break from that actually for a few years for personal reasons as I grew my family and things like that. And now I'm at a point where I thought the timing was right with the market transition into private LTE in the enterprise. I think it really has potential, and I'm just happy as I could be with Solona and helping drive this market forward.
Andrew Vonage, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. It's always fascinating seeing where you've gone and the new things that you're involved with.
Yeah, could I add one thing? I mean,
yeah,
Solona,
please.
we're announcing our online community as well here in the next week or two.
Wonderful.
And we would like everybody to go out and make sure that if you're looking for training, you're looking for content, we're going to be having a lot of avenues to get private LTE and CBRS content out into the market.
Okay.
Blogs, podcasts, videos, things of that nature. So sign up for our newsletter on our website on solona.io. On our newsletter, it comes out once a month. You won't get spammed, but we will keep you informed on when that community launches, as well as information on when we post things.
Right,
So.
and this video will be rebroadcast as a podcast for wireless LAN professionals, and of course it'll be up on the Solona website as well, so it's a great resource for getting started for someone like myself who really is a neophyte when it comes to this new segment.
We're all neophytes in the beginning.
Right.
We got to learn somewhere.
And with that, I will say thank you so much. We've got a lot more coming up from wireless LAN professionals after this, so please stay tuned, and we'll see you in just a few minutes right here on Live Now. Well, now it's time for a little behind-the-scenes look at what goes on before the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference actually comes to fruition. I'm here with Matthew Castile, who is one of the event organizers and managers here, who works closely with Keith. And first of all, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, my pleasure to be here, for sure.
This is the culmination of really like a year's worth of work every year, right?
Exactly. So last year's WLPC ends, we have a conversation, what do we need to do different, and let's start preparing for the next year.
Tell me about that. I mean, most people don't realize that an event like this, 2-day, 3-day, 5-day, depending on if you took some of the boot camps and such, I mean, it starts a long time ago, and people show up here, but they may not realize just what goes into producing an event like this. Can you give us a little bit of a breakdown of everything that has to happen?
Well, so the idea behind WLPC is it's an event that's not like all the other ones. It's not a huge vendor-driven event, so we're looking for ways that wireless LAN professionals can get hands-on experience. They can share real-world experience. You know, we don't allow sales pitches per se, but it's just your experience. You can be from any background, but as a wireless LAN professional. And so with that in mind, we break the conference up into two sections, the boot camp and the main conference. So for the boot camp, first we interview everyone and say, which kind of classes do you need, do you want? Send out those interviews, get them back, and then we have to start preparing for those classes. And then we do interviews, what kind of topics do you want to hear? So we send out a survey, get that back, and then we start preparing all those classes based on the results we get from the people. So as soon as we have that information, then it's like, build the classes, order the parts, figure out who goes in which room, and all those logistics start taking off as soon as we get that feedback from the people.
So now, when you talk about the big vendor-driven shows like Cisco Live or VMworld, they've got teams of 20, 50, 100 people working behind the scenes, making sure that everything from the signage to the room setups to the presentations, are all done. How many people would you say are on the team for Wireless LAN Professionals?
Well, we've got probably a smaller team, like 3, 5, that are full-time prepping all year long. Excuse me. But what we have is, because it's a community-driven team, we pull from the community, people volunteer, they'll jump in last minute, and so it has this feel that's like community-driven. So a lot of our volunteers come from people who are here. Besides that, I've got kids and helpers that come out and they volunteer there, I pay them, and they just move boxes as we need. But a lot of the stuff you see comes from the actual attendees who help and participate, and just they love doing it, and so they jump in and say, how can I help? And I put them to work.
Now, something that I love about this conference, and I love about Keith and you, more than a lot of other places will go to a hotel and just rent everything, rent the projectors and the AV and all that kind of stuff. Keith, on the other hand, I know he, like me, hates to rent stuff because that feels like money you're never going to get back. So he actually owns a lot of the infrastructure. Tell me about that.
So we had the realization that a lot of people who probably rent facilities at hotels do, and that is, wow, I'm paying more than it would cost to purchase this per day. Why don't I just purchase it and then we'll store it? And so we kind of have grown WLPC in a box, so to speak.
It's funny because, as technology prices come down, like let's say a projector. A projector that used to be $5,000 is now maybe $1,000, but to rent it is like $600 or $700 a day, and you need it for 3 days. It's better to buy one. Almost even if you were just going to leave it behind.
Exactly. Yeah, it would be cheaper to buy it. It's like ink for your printer. You might as well just buy a new printer because it's cheaper that way. Yeah. So it's another way we can plus then we know all the gear, we have what we need, and we just kind of helps us think through strategically as well. Like, okay, what do we need? How many projectors? How many screens? So.
Now you've been doing this for how long?
As long as there's been WLPCs -1. So
did you have the gray hair before?
No, in fact, I had a full head of hair, was long and flowing, and yeah, so.
So you've been doing this a while. Do you have a background in event management? Tell us a little bit about your history.
So I started helping Keith just as a virtual assistant. So I did some things with websites.
Hold on. No. You're not. You're real.
Yeah, I used to be safe and virtual. He didn't know where I lived, and then he found out. But so he was having me do stuff on the website. He said, "Hey, I have this conference coming up. Could you put a registration sheet on a registration form on the website?" Right. Sure.
That was your mistake.
That was my mistake. No, that was my privilege and honor. And then he said, "Hey, would you mind coming and doing registration?" And sure, bring your wife. And then he's hooked me in, and then we've been doing it ever since. So every year we learn something like, what could we do better? And so we're continuously growing and learning how to be an event planner.
Now we're here at the beautiful Point Hilton Squaw Peak, which is definitely a lot larger than the last place. So this conference is definitely growing. You also do other ones around the world. What's that like?
So those are, we go over Europe, and then we're growing to other places as well. So those, the same concept, but the planning is different, and we do have to rely on their hotels and what they provide there, and we can't see everything ahead of time, so it takes a lot more conversations, printouts, understanding. I can get here. In fact, I live in town here. I can actually drive and walk the facilities. There, you have to hope for the best, and plan accordingly. Although in Europe, it seems the hotels, projectors and stuff are included a little easier, so on a practical level, it works easier to be remote in Europe.
So what would you say is, for instance, this conference here, this is day one we're shooting this on. What sort of surprises do you find are impossible to anticipate?
Well, I try to think through a lot of them, but I think as we grow, one of the surprises is when you add 50 more people, it's not just 50 more people, things get exponentially busier. So if I have to answer a few emails, but if you add 50 emails and answering questions, so those kind of things that I will learn and I will try to take something from it, but you just never know. People have questions, or if technology doesn't work, we all know to think through that, but you never know. So.
Last question then, if there's somebody watching this who is either thinking about getting into event planning or does event planning for their wireless company or whomever, what's the best piece of advice do you think you could give them? Other than run fast.
No. You don't want to do that. You want to lean in and just realize that stress doesn't mean it's bad. It's one of those things that helps us focus. And then the other thing is just plan, think it through. I would say I'm a visual person, so even just drawing things out, like what will this actually look like, and visualize every day from someone walking up to the door what is going to happen. And the more you can see it before it happens, the better prepared you will be.
Matthew Castillo, thanks so much for your time today, man.
Absolutely,
Appreciate
my pleasure.
it.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll be right back with more Live Now. Hello and welcome to Live Now, the tech show for information and trends. We are here in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, where it's gorgeous and sunny even though it's February. We're at the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference 2020, which is a wonderful show for the Wi-Fi world and all sorts of wireless networking people. And we're lucky enough to be joined today by the wonderful David Coleman, now of Extreme Networks. David, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for having me back, my friend.
Being here. Oh, well, it's wonderful. We chatted with you last year.
Last year, yeah.
Last year.
Different hotels, same city.
Different hotel, different company.
Yeah, I was with Aerohive Networks a year ago.
Aerohive Networks,
Right.
and you'd been with Aerohive for a considerable portion of time.
Yeah, so my background, I've been in the Wi-Fi industry, networking for 30, 40 years, Wi-Fi industry for 20, and I joined
Has there been
Aerohive.
20 years of Wi-Fi?
Yeah,
It barely seems possible.
And actually, the 20th anniversary of the term Wi-Fi was coined 20 years ago.
And considering you're 35 years old.
Oh yeah, right.
You started really early.
Yeah, I wish. The big 6 O's coming next week, if you want to know the truth.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. Obviously, being around all those antennas hasn't diminished your youthful looks.
So Wi-Fi is actually good for your health.
It looks that way.
Long story short, I had my own company for 10 years in Wi-Fi consulting and training. Went to work for Aerohive because they had this really disruptive technology, which was a cooperative control distributed architecture that nobody else was doing at the time. And then stuck around with them for about 10 years. And it was it was a really great company to work for.
Now, were you like employee number 17
I don't remember my
then?
employee number, but prior to the acquisition from Extreme, I was one of about 4 or 5 people that was still left. So
Right.
I think I started when there was about 35 people.
So it was really a startup back when you started.
Oh, it was absolutely a startup. And Aerohive went public. And
Yeah, you saw it grow, you
Yeah.
saw it go public, and then kept going. Again, some fantastic products, some great software in their Hive Manager. I know was very popular.
So that's actually interesting that you brought that up, because I went to work for Aerohive because they had this disruptive technology that was Wi-Fi architecture, but then a funny little thing happened along the way, and that was cloud technology. And we went through several generations of cloud, and the final generation of Hive Manager is really the main reason that Extreme Networks acquired Aerohive last summer, because they wanted that cloud technology to kind of be the heart and soul and engine of the company. So,
Well, and I know when Hive Manager came out,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was groundbreaking at the time, but now, years later, many companies have, I think, gone along with that model of wanting to do cloud-based management.
Right, we were one of the first 2 companies that did a first-generation cloud, which at the end of the day was just standing up servers in data centers.
Right.
We're currently on a 3rd-generation cloud that is built on top of microservices and an AWS or Google Cloud type architecture. So we actually have a head start on most of our competitors. with that. It's no longer called Hive Manager. Now that it is Extreme, it's called Extreme Cloud IQ, obviously. So
very catchy, very catchy name. Cloud IQ, I like it actually.
Extreme Cloud IQ.
Extreme Cloud IQ.
Yeah. So it's exciting stuff.
But no more bees.
No more bees. The bees are gone.
Do you know how many squishy bees I've collected from Aerohive over the years? A
more
lot of squishy bees. My kids love you for the squishy bees.
Well, thank you, but we've traded that in for purple. So I should be wearing purple because everything Extreme is purple.
Indeed.
But it's actually pretty exciting, and what I'm excited about being at Extreme and being one of the lucky employees that came over is that Extreme had a really awesome portfolio of networking products. Great switching technology, data center technology, a solution called Air Defense, which has been the premier wireless intrusion prevention solution for years. Locationing, something called IoT Defender. I mean, I could go on and on and on. They really have a portfolio all the way from the access layer all the way to the data center. And it's no real secret here. I mean, legal disclaimer, because the lawyers make me say this, but the goal is to get pretty much the entire networking portfolio talking to the cloud so it can be managed from a cloud perspective.
Right. I know that back when, in Aerohive, you guys had a very good vertical with higher education and that segment. Not as much with things like large venues and stadiums. I know Extreme, for instance, does a lot of work with large venues and stadiums. Absolutely. So it feels to me like they knew what they were doing when they acquired Aerohive, and it's going to be a good fit.
We had the missing component that they were looking for, which was cloud, and now called Extreme Cloud IQ. They had their own Wi-Fi, the Wing architecture and the Identify stuff, which is all really good stuff as well. And you're right, they're in verticals that Aerohive just couldn't get into. Extreme is they're the.
I mean, they got the sales team, the organization.
Yeah, I mean, we're the NFL partner for Wi-Fi and analytics for the NFL, and we're in lots of stadiums. So Extreme's been doing that for a long time, and they're very good at it. Extreme does very, very well in healthcare, which Aerohive dabbed in a little bit, but Extreme has a really good healthcare division and lots of very large retail customers. Aerohive had retail customers. Extreme has a lot of big box retail customers, but at the end of the day, Extreme's in all verticals. And what's exciting for me is I was always a believer in Aerohive, not just their wireless architecture, but their cloud technology. What's exciting for me is that Extreme's going to be able to take it to the next level, where quite frankly, Aerohive could just never get it to that next level, and Extreme's going to be able to do that.
So speaking of exciting to you, I mean, you are a Wi-Fi guy. You quite literally wrote the book, a very, very thick book on Wi-Fi. But now everything is moving to the cloud. So what does a Wi-Fi guy do in the cloud?
Well, Wi-Fi is just a big part of networking, okay, because it's access technology, and at the end of the day, most individuals and most people, both in the enterprise that are at home, they're probably connecting to the network wirelessly, as opposed to a wire. That being said, there's still wired networking. There's always a piece of copper somewhere, okay? And of course, the big paradigm shift in networking in general is cloud. So I'm part of the marketing team. I'm the director of product management, and I'm on this new technical evangelism team along with Perry Correll. And a big part of what I'm supposed to be doing is evangelizing about cloud.
Perry's also formerly of Aerohive.
Yeah, formerly of Aerohive
Great
as
guy.
well.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're evangelizing about cloud and not just about Wi-Fi technology. But yeah, I mean, I have a long Wi-Fi background. It's interesting that you bring that up because I do a lot of webinars with the company, and we recently did a webinar on wireless or Wi-Fi design concepts back in December, and it broke records in the amount of registrations.
Did you break the internet?
Wait, not quite like Kim Kardashian, but no, we got well north of 9,000 registrations, so we were very happy about that. And
that's not PewDiePie sort of numbers, but at the same time, we're talking about engineers here and
all over the world. Yeah, and so there's clearly still, even though cloud is, it's the management platform is what cloud is.
Right.
You still have to have the access technology, which is what Wi-Fi is, and so Wi-Fi, even though it gets better and better and better, it still gets more complex and harder. I mean, it gets better, but it gets harder. So wireless design is still important. So to segue, we're actually going to probably be doing some little roadshows about Wi-Fi design in probably a March and April timeframe in North America in 2020 to talk more about Wi-Fi design. But it's clearly a topic that a lot of people are always going to be interested in.
And that's coming soon to a city near you?
Coming soon.
Can you
stay tuned.
Go on to the Extreme website and find...
We'll hopefully have information soon.
Right. So you were speaking here at the wireless, we could talk about Aerohive and Extreme all day, but we are at the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference. You gave a talk here yesterday, very well received. What were you talking about?
Yeah, I was talking about dynamic frequency selection, which is a technology that APs use for
trying to figure out...
try to avoid radar, so they don't interfere with radar. And I actually did the presentation back in Prague back in October and did an updated version of the presentation. And I'm proud to say it's very well received. This is a vendor neutral conference. It's not an Extreme conference or a competitors conference, but everybody's here. And it's just a bunch of us Wi-Fi geeks learning about wireless technologies in general. And
so in the spectrum, and forgive me, I'm a little ignorant, in the spectrum of Wi-Fi, does radar would take priority?
Absolutely. So in a segment of channels in the 5 gigahertz band,
it's on the same frequency.
Wi-Fi cannot interfere with radar, weather radar and military radar. So what APs have to do is, if they detect one of 6 different types of radar pulses, is they have to send out what's called a channel switch announcement. Not to get too geeky,
not at all.
To tell the clients,
we can do geeky.
Hey, we're on channel 100. We just heard radar. We gotta go. So let's all go to channel 36.
Right.
So it's a preventative and protective measure, so we don't interfere with radar. That's important for weather and military communications. So
now that's and that's in the 5 gigahertz
5 gigahertz
band. I know something that's being talked about here at the show, which is not something that is a standard yet, though, is Wi-Fi 6E,
right?
Which is taking Wi-Fi up into the 6 gigahertz.
Yes.
If that becomes legal and the FCC approves that, is that no longer going to be an issue then?
No, so it'll be different issues. So I'm extremely excited about 6 gigahertz because it's going to open up a whole chunk.
I just like that it's called 6E because you can say that's really 6E.
It's really 6E. I hadn't thought about that, but I'll be stealing that.
The marketing, the marketing T-shirts write themselves.
There you go. Yeah. It's actually pretty exciting. It'll happen in the United States first, and other countries will follow. But it's a whole chunk of new frequency space for unlicensed use. The FCC has realized that unlicensed spectrum opens up all kinds of opportunity and generates billions into the United States economy. So that's why they're going to open up more space, including for Wi-Fi. There are some incumbents there, though. So the rules still are being a little bit determined. There might be some rules about power rules. There's no real DFS, but there might be something called I think it's called AFS, Automated Frequency Selection, which is kind of similar, but it's going to be linked into a database type system to make sure you're not interfering with some of the incumbents. So not quite the same thing, but kind of the same concept, so that you don't interfere with other radio transmitters that are already existing in the 6 gigahertz band.
Gotcha. And so I assume Extreme will be on top of 6E when it's
we'll be aggressive.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. And once again, I've also been evangelizing quite a bit about Wi-Fi 6 and 802.11ax. The cool thing about 6 gigahertz, it'll be all 802.11ax technology. Right. There's no need for backward compatibility.
So it's a little weird that it'll be Wi-Fi 6 on 6 gigahertz. The timing is suspicious.
Which is why the name, the Wi-Fi Alliance came up with the
6E.
Next certification 6E.
Yeah.
So try to avoid a little bit of confusion.
Is it still AX or is it?
It'll be all AX technology on 6 gigahertz. With 5 gigahertz, there has to be backwards compatible technology.
We just have a minute or two more.
Sure.
I know, speaking of Wi-Fi 6, last year Wi-Fi 6 was just around the corner. I get the sense that it is still just around the corner.
Yeah.
Does it, even though it's a year since we last spoke.
It's here. I mean, every vendor, including us, we have a whole host of APs.
And devices, the new like iPhone 11.
Well, that's the good news. Probably when I was talking to you a year ago, the devices really weren't here yet.
Right. So that is until you get the devices.
Yeah. So and you'll really start seeing the true benefits as the client populations increase.
Right.
The good news is most of the devices that are starting to come out have Wi-Fi 6 radio chipsets. The iPhone 11s that came out. So more. If you look at the projections, everything moving forward is going to have 802.11ax technology, and then we can start taking advantage of the multi-user component. And that's so as client populations increase, then we'll really start taking advantage of Wi-Fi 6 technology.
Fantastic. And the last thing I want to ask is just about you personally, going from Aerohive to Extreme. How are they treating you? How's the culture been over there? Is it fun and exciting?
Yeah, it's absolutely fun and exciting. You know, change is good. That's why this old guy has learned that actually change is a good thing. So there's new challenges. I'm having a good time learning about new technologies that Extreme has, meeting new people, and new customers, new partners. So
you're pushing the 6.0, but you're still learning new stuff. It's great.
Yeah, you never stop learning, and you can never stop learning. So, like when you graduate from college, when a doctor graduates from college, does he just stop learning?
Yeah, I assume that's it, right? That's it.
The doctor needs to learn about the new coronavirus, right? So, same thing. There's always room to continue. Continuing education is important.
Well, that is a great message. And with that, David Coleman, I would like to say thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
It's great to see you again.
Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. And we're going to take a short break, but we'll be back with a lot more from Wireless LAN Professionals right after this here on Live Now. So now we're joined by GT Hill from Titan Ranch. Now, last year, GT, we spoke to you about your unique and really innovative venue space that you've got back where you're from. First of all, for people who didn't see that last year, tell us what we're talking about, and then we'll get a little update from you.
Awesome. We have a former Titan II nuclear missile silo, and it has been...
A former Titan II nuclear missile. I think you just need to let that sink in for a moment here, because you say we have that. Well, not everyone has that,
Yeah, so they decommissioned them in the 80s, and longer story, but I bought one with the purpose of opening it up and doing something cool, and that was 10 years ago, almost now. So we've opened it up and over the past 10 years renovated it, and now we do events there. We do everything from children birthday parties. We have a wedding booked. Someone's going to get married in a missile silo, which is awesome. But more specifically, we do training. So Keith actually and I have partnered, and so we put on different training events there. But what makes it unique, number one, you're in a missile silo.
Yeah, I would think that would make it just a little bit unique.
Yeah, you're about 35 feet underground behind 3 6,000-pound doors when you're taking class. But then during the day...
So you're not sneaking out?
No, that's how we get their attention, is we actually force them to stay. But then what else we do is different events. So during a lunch, we'll do team building or fun things like axe throwing and skeet shooting. We have a bunch of heavy equipment like big excavators that people can use. We do drones, but we're always improving. We're looking at doing a climbing wall so you could actually climb your way out. There's an escape shaft that people can take. So lots of cool stuff we do out there.
So it's been a year since we last spoke to you about that. How has the reception been? Is it something that's easy to keep booked?
The downside of it is that it's in Arkansas. I would love to move it to a more populous area, but that's a little bit difficult. But everyone that's been there has had great things to say. We're very thankful for that. They've had great feedback. One of the things we tend to hear is that it's a man spot, but interesting enough, we've had teenage birthday parties there, female teenage birthday parties, and a lot of students come through that are female. They just love it. They jump on the tractor like anybody else.
Women like decommissioned nuclear missile silos as well. Why wouldn't they?
Exactly. I completely agree.
So it's in Arkansas. Are there a lot of these sort of sites around the country?
Yeah, there's a number of them. In fact, we're in Arizona right now, where there are 18 about 2 hours south of us. But not many of them have had anything done with them. They obviously are quite expensive, and it takes a special kind of not smart person to open one up and do something with it.
You said there's 18 here, so are they generally clustered together, or is there more than one where you are?
Yeah, there's 18 in Arkansas as well. And yeah, they kind of cluster usually around an Air Force base, typically. But there's different versions, if you will. Think of versions of anything. The Titan II was the biggest, largest ICBM the U.S. has ever had. But there's still active versions of Minuteman, Minuteman IIIs are all spread around the country right now.
So what would you say was the biggest challenge you had in retrofitting this space to use as an event venue?
The perseverance, really. I mean, it's just one thing after the other. It's like, imagine restoring an old house or anything. It just, when you first see it, we went in for the first time, it was like a shipwreck. So it had water in it for 30 years. So just dealing with that. But once we got it to a point where Keith said, hey, let's do some classes there, from there it was actually not too bad. We're adding bathrooms right now. So we have 2 right now, we're adding 3 more because we're getting larger and larger groups out there. But the challenge is really the perception. And once people are like, hey, that's cool, I'm going to go, let's fly to Arkansas, then they tend to love the place.
And how would you describe the quality of the Wi-Fi?
It is good. We got lots of multipath underground, no interference. You're in a Faraday cage, basically. I think it's pretty good.
GT, if people want to learn more about it, where would we send them?
TitanRanch.com. If you're looking for the training, you can go to WLAN-Pros/Titan Ranch. And yeah, that's a good place to go for it. I know Keith's got some cool stuff in mind, maybe some deep dives, maybe some very unique training out there here in 2020.
GT Hill, thank you so much for your time.
Sir. Thank you.
And we'll be right back in just a couple more minutes with more from Live Now. Hello and welcome to Live Now, the info show for technology and trends. My name is Ben Friedman and we are here in beautiful, sunny Phoenix, Arizona today at the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference 2020. And it is beautiful. It's February here, but it's like 75, 78 degrees outside. People are outside, they're wearing shorts. If you haven't been to Phoenix in February, you ought to come by because it's fantastic. And we are lucky enough this afternoon to be joined by none other than Dennis Burrell from Ventev. Dennis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I have talked to a bunch of the folks here, the Wi-Fi folks here, and a lot of them make software, a lot of them make hardware. I don't know a lot about Ventev. Why don't you tell the folks, who is Ventev, where does it come from, what does it do?
Okay. Ventev is, we're known as Ventev Wireless Infrastructure. We're owned by Tesco Technologies, and we are an ecosystem provider for radio manufacturers. So we don't do any of the active gear, we just do all of the ecosystem surrounding the active gear. So we support their products with enclosures, antennas, and cable solutions, and also power systems. So nothing active, but we like to call ourselves the ecosystem provider for the active gear.
Now, and where are you guys based out of?
Ventev is based out of San Antonio, Texas.
Beautiful place, love the Riverwalk.
But Tesco, our parent company, is based out of Hunt Valley, Maryland, so right outside of Baltimore.
Outside of Baltimore?
Yes.
And so you've got some background in both of those places?
Yes, I'm actually originally from Baltimore, and then just with the different paths of my career, I ended up in Texas and at Ventev out of San Antonio.
And how long have you been with Ventev now?
I've been with Ventev, it'll be 10 years in November.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've seen a lot of changes then in the business, in the industry.
Yes. A lot of changes, particularly with the different technology trends, from the different types of wireless technology, from N to AC and now AX, and supporting those different protocols for Wi-Fi and coming up with the products to support those radios that have been coming out based on those technologies.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about the process, how that works. Do you guys OEM to these companies and build their boxes for them, or is it always a thing where they're bringing you in on deals sort of as a secondary vendor?
A little bit of both. We do some OEM antennas for some of the radio manufacturers, and by radio manufacturers, I'm talking to AP manufacturers. I don't want anyone to get that mixed up, but we do
the access point
right.
guys,
So,
yeah.
but we. Outside of Wi-Fi, we also do some cellular stuff as well, but that's a small percentage of what we do.
So it's mostly Wi-Fi?
Yeah, but our main thrust is Wi-Fi. So we've done some OEMs for some of the AP manufacturers in the past, but mostly right now what we do is based on the access points that they release, we come up with products to support those access points. So for instance, if there's a situation where they need something aesthetically pleasing or they need to hide the access point, we come up with products like that. We like to try to think outside the box to come up with different solutions to support these access points. So we have some innovative solutions in our portfolio.
So speaking of outside the box, when you build an enclosure, for some aesthetic reasons, do you put their entire physical access point in the enclosure, or do you take the guts out and build it into something new?
Right. So we support the entire AP. So we don't take anything apart. We take that actual AP and we'll put it in an enclosure solution, whether it be an outdoor enclosure solution, a ceiling tile enclosure, a hard cap ceiling enclosure solution. We take that access point and we hide it. So no longer, in some cases, you can walk into, say, an enterprise and look up at the ceiling and you won't see an access point. That's what we consider some of our strengths with our solutions. We hide it.
So I want to get on and talk about some of the other stuff you do, but I can't resist. That sounds fascinating. What are some of the craziest enclosures you've seen for hiding these things? Do you have to you're doing Wi-Fi in a zoo and you've got to make them look like rocks or something?
So we do have enclosures that look like rocks.
Rock enclosures?
Yes. We've done what we call right now our wireless bollards. So we actually have bollards. So if you're in a park or anywhere, the lighted bollards, we've come up with designs that look like those, but they hide the Wi-Fi.
But
so they
hide
still
the
have
access
a light
point
in them and the antenna.
Right.
We've done some. We've worked in conjunction with some lighting manufacturers to design some bollards that do have lights in them, and the Wi-Fi is hidden within the actual bollard. And then we also have some other bollards that are Wi-Fi only that don't have lights in them.
So being a guy who, first of all, obviously I use a lot of Wi-Fi, but just like everyone does, but I also go to a lot of these Wi-Fi and networking shows. One thing that I often do when I walk into a hotel or walk into a store is I'll look up, see if I recognize the brand of access point.
Right.
But you're saying a lot of these are cleverly disguised. It may not look at it. What sort of things might it look like? Are they built into lighting fixtures? Are they built into, I don't even know, like wall hangings, sconces, that kind of thing?
Right. So we've looked at a lot of those in the past, and I can go over a couple of them with you that we've actually come out with products for. So imagine walking into a building and you know how you have the light switch where you turn on the lights, right?
The light switch, yeah.
It's a junction box. So we've designed an antenna that fits into a junction box. So you can take that antenna and you can put it anywhere on the wall. It has articulation of plus or minus 45 degrees, and then the access point is either hidden behind the wall or on the ceiling. So when you come in the room, the only thing you see is a junction box. So it's just a junction box, no big deal. But in actuality, it's actually the antenna that's providing the Wi-Fi coverage in the room.
Now, does Ventev do the final install of these, or do you give that back to the?
Right, so we don't do any installation. We have partners that do that. We just do the actual products.
Right, and then the installers might have to paint it a certain color, or to match a particular decor.
Right. So one of the things that all of our antennas can be is they can be painted, they can be themed. We work with a lot of amusement parks.
Themed antennas.
Yeah, a lot of amusement parks that hide the antennas and they theme them either with colors or whatever the ride is, whatever the theming of the ride is, they theme the enclosures or the antennas the same. So it blends in perfectly, you wouldn't even know. We've even had some that they put like concrete over, so you would think it was actually part of the concrete of the actual
actually looks
ride.
like-
it actually
it looks like
looks,
concrete.
yeah, it blends right in perfectly. You wouldn't even know unless you look closely. So my thing is whenever I walk into a building or anything, I always try to find the Wi-Fi, and then I'll say, okay, what solution could I come up with to hide that if it wasn't hidden or something like that? So I'm always trying to look to come up with something or some type of design where we can make it either smaller or hide it. For instance, we have a line of what we call small form factor products. And what we try to do is we try to just push the envelope on how small, say, we can make an antenna. Our original antenna, one of our patch antennas, a 6 dBi patch antenna, was a 6 dBi antenna, and it was 8 by 8. So I wanted to see how far we could push the envelope. So we came up with what we called our micro patch, which was about 5 by 5 inches. And then after that, we came up with what I called my nano patch.
Nano patch?
Yeah, which was about 4 by 4 inches. And then after that, we came up with what we call our Pico patch, which is actually the size of a business card.
Wow.
So we're always trying to push the envelope, and now in the next quarter, we'll be releasing what I call my femto patch antenna. So all of those names are like, for instance, micro patches.
Can you tell us how big that's going to be?
Yeah.
Or?
Yes. The micro patches, so it's 10 to the minus 6 if you look from an engineering perspective.
Right.
Then the nano patch 10 to the minus 9.
Right.
Then the Pico patch 10 to the minus 12.
Is that the business card one?
And the femto is that's the business one. And then the femto is 10 to the minus 15. So that just shows each of them going smaller from a engineering perspective as far as when you're going through the different typologies for.
And how big will the femto patch?
The femto patch it'll actually be a slightly larger, about 3.2 by 3.2. The reason why the Pico is so small is 5 gig only, but the femto patch will be 2.4 and 5, so it'll be dual band design, but it'll be smaller than the other dual band designs.
Right, and I'm not a radio transmission expert, but the lower your gigahertz, you need a larger antenna.
Right, exactly. And all of our designs for Wi-Fi are 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. So the larger, the 2.4 makes the antenna larger. But we got a couple of tricks that we played to make the antenna slightly smaller than what someone would usually think that antenna size should be.
Now, I don't know if this is a segment that you build anything for, but what about sort of hardened devices or devices to withstand temperature extremes, military grade devices? Do you guys do anything in that?
So we don't really do any military grade devices, but we do some class 1, div 1 hardened type of enclosure solutions. So for instance,
I'm a neophyte, so what is class 1, what does that
mean? So those are for situations where you want to have Wi-Fi coverage, say on an oil rig or something that's highly flammable, and you need something that, for instance, if there's a spark, it won't ignite anything. So they put them in these what they call class 1, div 1 hardened solutions. So we actually have enclosures for that to provide to that industry.
Now, what about power systems? You guys make power systems as well?
Yes.
And what does that mean? Is that the power to supply the access point with the power cabling?
Yes, so the power system, so imagine you want Wi-Fi in a parking lot, right?
I always do.
Okay, and the lights are set to come on at a certain time and then go off. And once they're off, there's no power to the poles. So we have power systems that while the lights are on, they charge the battery, and then when the lights go off, it kicks on and still supplies power to the access point. So you'll have coverage 24/7.
So that's a battery system
Yeah,
as well.
So it's a battery system, battery backup, one of our power systems. And then we do some remote monitoring and some remote systems as well. For instance, if you're doing something, for instance, in the oil and gas industry, a lot of those things are in remote areas, and you need Wi-Fi or coverage. We have battery systems for that'll charge the modem, that'll power the modem that's used out there to deliver signal back. So
here we are, Wireless LAN Professionals 2020. What sort of aesthetics are people looking for this year? What are you hearing out there?
It's not more so what they're looking for in particular, but it's more so what are you supporting, right? So right now, AX is the next technology that's coming out, or Wi-Fi 6.
Right.
So,
and is there a different enclosure for Wi-Fi 6 than you would have built for Wi-Fi 5, or is it different antennas?
Well, it's not that it's a different enclosure, but there are different parameters that you have to cover. For instance, some of the newer APs are larger. And if your enclosure isn't large enough, then you have to come up with a larger enclosure to house that access point. And then there's if it's an access point that needs external antennas, how do you provide the antenna for that in an enclosure solution? For instance, one of our big sellers is what we call our colo mounts. And what the colo mounts do is they co-locate the antenna and the access point into a clamshell design. So no longer will you have to look up in an area where you have Wi-Fi and you see the access point and then you see the antenna right next to it. What we've done is we've come up with a design where we co-locate both of them and we provide articulation for the antenna so that when you mount it, you can precisely get the coverage that you want in the area that you want by moving the arm that has the antenna attached to it. So, coming up with those types of things to support all of the newer APs. Since some of the newer APs are larger, we had to make those colo mounts slightly larger to accommodate that plus the antenna. And then we're always working with new vendors, so we're always coming up with products to support all of the access points that are being released. We like to say that we're vendor agnostic. We don't concentrate on one particular vendor, but we support all vendors.
So finally, tell me about some of those new products. What else is new that's out there? Obviously, you've got the ones where you're trying to hide stuff as well. The class 1 stuff you were talking about. Anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, one of our products that we've come out with, and we're actually doing some revisions to it to come out with different forms of the product, is that everyone is so used to having Wi-Fi from a ceiling down type of coverage pattern. So we've come up with and patented a design that comes from the floor up. So we patented what we call our floor panel antenna. It's a floor tile. Right. So it's a raised floor tile that we've embedded an antenna in. So now for all of the customers or all of the architects that want aesthetically pleasing solutions where they don't want to see any APs, they don't want to see anything on the wall, they don't want anything above the ceiling, we've come up with this solution. And for these types of applications, the antennas it's a raised floor type of building, but the antennas are in the floor. And then under the floor, they're doing the air, they're doing all of the cabling, and so that's where we place the access point. So what we have is we have a design that's from the bottom up and not from the top down. Now that type of coverage gets you closer to the client device because you're already closer, and they say the average height that someone holds their client device or their smartphone is 3.5 feet.
So you're closer to the floor than you are to the ceiling.
Right, so we've designed this so that we provide that coverage as closer to the client device.
And now you can turn the power down on the device because you're closer to the antenna.
Yeah, the power's all the way down. Yeah,
it's an elegant way to solve the problem. Yeah.
And then also in high density deployments, you have a lot of people. You want that RF cell small because you want to dedicate a certain amount of people to a specific access point. So that enables us to do that as well. So that one is patented, and we've deployed that in a few Fortune 10 companies, and that's one that we're really proud of, and we're doing some improvements for that to support other access point manufacturers as well.
Dennis Burrell, I could probably talk to you about this for another hour because there's so much stuff. It's fascinating stuff to see the other side of Wi-Fi. Right. Everyone here is cloud and software and whatever, but there's this whole other chunk of infrastructure that people really don't spend that much time thinking about. So thank you for joining us and talking about it today.
Right, thank you for having me.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
And we'll be back with a lot more from the Wireless LAN Professional Conference in just a few minutes. So stay with us right here on Live Now.
Thanks.
So now we're joined by Ferney Munoz, who is also behind the scenes here with Keith Parsons at the Wireless LAN Professional Conference. Fernay, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and I kind of like the way you pronounce my name.
I know before you said I should roll the R. Fernay.
Yeah, Fernay, yeah.
It sounds so much better when you do it than when I do it. So tell me, you work with Keith here. What do you do? What are your responsibilities?
Well, I do some of the trainings with ECHA and also do some CWMP training, but we also do consulting. And during the conferences, we are in charge of making sure registration happens, that all the technical needs are met for all the instructors and people doing presentations and deep dives and just making it happen.
So if I recall, you're originally from Colombia, but now you live in Utah.
That is correct, yes.
Culture shock there?
Not anymore. I've been here for 21 years, so I kind of overcame all of those.
But you do a lot of events in Latin America.
Yeah, classes in Spanish, 100%. And also we've done WLPC in Bogota before, and we're going to be doing one in Mexico this year.
So what would you say are the biggest differences, other than the language barrier, the cultural differences between a wireless LAN conference up here or training up here and training with the wireless LAN professionals down in Latin America?
Culturally, it's huge. One of the things is that the income that professionals have down there compared to the income that they have here, like their counterparts, I mean, they're doing the same things, but they just get a fraction of what people make up here. So getting training, if it is not sponsored by a company, is really hard for just like the average professional to go on their own and get training. Another thing is culturally, we're more like relaxed, more kick back, and like when training down there, we go on break, 15 minutes turns into 30, 45, 1 hour lunches, hour and a half, people show up late. It's like, we're not quite there yet.
So you're saying it's more laid back down there, people will go and whereas up here they're more on time?
Yeah. I think that's a cultural thing. That's not just a technical thing or that engineers are flaky on there. It's just a cultural thing. Overall, 2-hour siestas and 2-hour lunches, that's kind of like very common there and in Spain as well. It's not just Latin America. We also cover Spain, which is, it's Spanish, but it's slightly different Spanish. Just like the accents change and the terminology changes and similar things. But
do you find being from Latin America, are you looked down upon by people from Spain because you have that Latin America accent, like the way someone from like the South here is thought of as, sometimes looked down upon by folks from the North because they have that Southern drawl?
It could be, but actually, I've heard people from Spain saying that they like the accent from Colombia because it's just like flat. We don't have any, fluctuations of the language is really flat. But we kind of get looked down upon just like other, this is what I felt and what I've seen throughout the years is that Latin America kind of gets looked down from just technology overall, like, this is like a third world countries and, but these guys have the same challenges that we have up here. They are working in environments as difficult and as harsh as they have it here. It's the same, Wi-Fi doesn't speak Spanish or English or French, it's just same problems. So we're facing that.
What about the regulatory environment down there? Obviously, in America, we've got things like OSHA and, you've got to have all these sort of handicap things taken care of. Is it a similar regulatory environment down in Latin America for people installing Wi-Fi?
Oh, not as much. And I would say that one of the challenges faced down there by companies is that, like, unfortunately, corruption. Like, if you're bidding on a project, people on the buying side of things will kind of come and say like, hey, charge more and, give me, a kickback. So going and bidding into projects becomes more challenging because now there's that extra thing you have to plan for that, I haven't seen up here at all.
So, and last question, I'm really a neophyte when it comes to Latin America. I've really only been to Mexico, and I think I went to Nicaragua once, but other than that, I haven't been down to all the South American countries, which I would love to do. A lot of times people will sort of put those all together in a single entity. Oh, it's Latin America. But do you find there's a lot of cultural differences between the Peru versus Argentina versus different places like Brazil, which of course is a whole different language again?
Oh, absolutely, and you're right. Here we get, you're short, dark hair, have an accent, you're Mexican, and eat spicy food. We don't. And not just the culture itself, but the meals, the way we eat, the way they dress, the way they talk, the way like we joke around, and the way there's the daily jargon that we use in our languages vary, like country to country. And yes, Brazil, they completely different. They speak Portuguese, and interesting, they understand Spanish, but we do not understand Portuguese, like one-way thing. But yeah, it is completely different, the culture and everything, yes.
Fernay, that is a fascinating look into the wireless LAN conference and training down in Latin America. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be right back with more after this on Live Now. Hello and welcome to Live Now, the info show for technology and trends. And we are very lucky today. We are in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona at the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference 2020. It is absolutely gorgeous here. It's 75 degrees outside in the middle of February. It's just fantastic. And we are lucky enough this afternoon to be joined by Mehmet Yavuz from Salona. Mehmet, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ben.
Salona, yeah, it's great to have you here. Thank you. Salona is a fascinating new company. You are the CTO and co-founder, and it's in this new chunk of spectrum, CBRS, I believe it is?
Correct.
I am a neophyte. I'm very new at that. Before we get into everything, what is CBRS, and tell me a little bit about it.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me here.
Great to have you.
We're excited about CBRS and the enterprise cellular networks. CBRS stands for Citizens Broadband Radio Service. And it's essentially a new chunk of 150 megahertz of spectrum that is now being available for enterprises to use in their facilities as a local network. It's clean, no interference. In the premise of an enterprise, it's a clean spectrum that they can use.
And is this is something that the FCC has just recently released,
And
when does this all happen?
It's been in the works for quite some time. FCC started this journey all the way back in 2015, and at that time there were a few companies. Now FCC made the official announcement end of January, I think January 27th, that this spectrum is available for commercial service, and now there's a really healthy ecosystem in the CBRS Alliance. I believe there are more than 160 companies right now, and it goes from devices to the infrastructure to the spectrum service. A healthy ecosystem is starting to deploy commercial networks now.
So there is a CBRS ecosystem, the
Correct.
CBRS Alliance. Are they a marketing body or more of a standards body?
They are not a standards body. It is an alliance for all the companies and customers using this spectrum or interested in this spectrum. And it puts together some specs, not necessarily separate standards. It essentially builds on the 3GPP standards, such as the 4G LTE or the 5G new radio standards. It's a body where how to use that technology in this specific band is being discussed and formulated.
Fantastic. So before we get into that, tell me a bit about you. You're the co-founder, and where does the company come from? Where does the name Salona come from?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Yeah, my background is in cellular wireless, including 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. I have been in this space for more than 20 years. I spent more than 15 years at Qualcomm, corporate R&D. Have worked on the technology from the design and in terms of the use cases, including enterprises. And the story of Salona is, I was at Barcelona a few years back. Barcelona.
Right.
At the Mobile World Congress, and there we were talking about private LTE. This was the very early days, I believe 2017. There we started having some discussion with Rajiv Shah who is the CEO and co-founder of Celona. And it really made sense to us, this thing, to bring the cellular technology into enterprise space. And Rajiv didn't forget that conversation. And when we finally made up our mind to go ahead with a new company, Rajiv's suggestion was, let's use Celona from Barcelona.
Now, private LTE, is that what CBRS used to be called, or is it a different thing, or is it the same thing?
Yeah, great question. Private LTE is essentially separating it from the public LTE.
Carriers.
Carriers.
Right.
So that's the traditional LTE deployment. Now, some people call it non-public LTE, some people call it private LTE, some people call it enterprise LTE, but essentially, it is a separate network in an enterprise premise for local use of the spectrum and services. Now, if an operator device comes into this enterprise, they can get service potentially from this network, but it's still a separate network, just like a Wi-Fi network in an enterprise.
I like the name private LTE or enterprise LTE because as an enterprise IT person, that instantly tells me what it is compared to CBRS that I actually had to look up this morning when I figured out, we were doing this interview. So that's a good, I like, enterprise LTE, or because people know what LTE is.
Yeah, and it's kind of tight though, right?
Right.
Okay, you like this concept of private LTE, but how do you get that?
Right.
Okay, there's a healthy ecosystem that provides the devices infrastructure, but you need spectrum. You need a separate spectrum to deploy this network, and that's what the CBRS spectrum brings right now. And there are many examples of this happening globally now.
Right.
From Germany to UK, now Japan, and others following.
So given your background and from Qualcomm and such, how significant is this deployment of private LTE? What sort of changes is it going to make in enterprise IT into people's network usage?
Great question, and I think it's very, very significant. And I've been a big believer in this, just like our other co-founders at Celona. And basically what it enables is to bring this great technology of 4G and very soon 5G to the use cases of the enterprise. And we don't see Wi-Fi going anywhere. We see a lot of applications continuing on Wi-Fi. But we also see a surge of new applications. Those applications typically are called more mission critical or business critical, and they typically require a more predictable, reliable network, maybe more lower latency, quality of service, low packet error rate requirements, and the examples are many. And those specific applications that require that higher level of quality are perfect fit for the 4G, LTE, and 5G. So that's where this technology comes in, enabling those new applications for the enterprise.
And so where does this fit with 5G? Because 5G is coming in, it's a new deployment, it's supposed to have the bandwidth and the latency, that is going to blow 4G out of the water and such. Where does CBRS fit in with the 5G puzzle?
Yeah, very good question again. I mean, the initial deployments of CBRS band will be with the LTE. So we are already in the beginning of that. We'll see many of these deployments happening throughout 2020 with the LTE technology. And that serves to many use cases. Now, 5G brings additional capabilities, right? For example, latency with LTE can be 20-30 milliseconds, and 5G can bring it down to 5 milliseconds or even less than a millisecond with release 16. The bandwidth can be higher, right? 100 megahertz bandwidth can be used instead of 20-40 megahertz. So those additional benefits will be essentially a roadmap of evolution from the LTE to 5G, and very likely next year in 2021 we'll see initial deployments of private 5G in the CBRS band, just like LTE.
Okay, so you can use 5G with CBRS,
Absolutely.
Just like you're using LTE.
Correct.
Interesting. What about device support? Is this something that is holding you back, or are the manufacturers supporting CBRS?
Yeah, they are. And mainstream chipsets are really now coming with the support of this band. For example, Qualcomm chipsets support the CBRS band. both for the 4G LTE and also for the 5G new radio. So that is the chipset support. And now when you come to the device manufacturers, they are using these chips to make their devices, and many of these devices, from the tablets to the handhelds to the IoT gateways, all support this band. And a really important point is operators like Verizon are really interested in this band as well. And they are making this a requirement for the devices that operate in their network. So now we see iPhone 11 already commercial in the CBRS band, Samsung Galaxy S10, Pixel 4, lots of LG phones, and the list goes on and on. So that is the great news about the band support, and lots of infra vendors are getting into supporting this band as well.
I know one existing problem that carriers face is congestion in highly congested areas, stadiums, sporting arenas, where you see you've got a signal, but you just can't make a call. Does CBRS, will it help offload some of that, perhaps? Or
yeah, it definitely has that potential to offload some of the traffic of operator devices, and that's typically called neutral host type service. The real question is, how will these deployments happen? Will they be an extension of the operator networks, like the traditional model of DAS or operator small cells, or will they be driven by the enterprise? We see a huge demand from the enterprise side in terms of having a network in their premise deployed using their own infrastructure, which is under their control. They have full visibility of what is going in that network, so they can serve their own devices, but they also would like to serve to the devices that belong to the operators. So it's kind of a dual use case, and the real scalability, we believe, is going to come with the enterprises embracing this technology, just like Wi-Fi, and it becomes a connectivity solution, wireless connectivity solution in their premises.
So you talked about the alliance, the CBRS alliance. There's a bunch of new players in there as well. Without revealing too much of your roadmap, what is unique about Celona? What's your unique sales proposition?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And at very high level, I'll say this. At Celona, we have a combination of 3 sets of DNAs. That's how we call it. We have people like myself, who's coming from the cellular world, from Qualcomm or companies on that space. We have people coming from the enterprise networking space, like Raji or Azer, from the maybe Aruba Networks and Cisco and so forth. And we have people coming from the cloud world, which brings the cloud software expertise. So we're bringing all of these things together. And the ultimate goal is to have a solution that can be easily used and deployed by the enterprises. So we pay a lot of attention in terms of how it integrates with the enterprise network. Our solution is plug and play, but it's also leveraging the existing infrastructure, such as the local area network, switches, on the back end, whatever identity management and device management systems they like to use. All of those are easily integrated in a frictionless manner, without compromising the benefits and the capabilities of the cellular technology. So that's one. The other crucial aspect is all of our solution is built around applications, because applications drive the need for this new kind of connectivity. So we pay a lot of attention to how application KPIs and the service level objectives are maintained, how quality of service such as bandwidth, packet error, latency requirements are met. And maybe as a third one, I would say we leverage AI in a very significant way. We leverage AI from the planning of the network to the deployment, operations, optimization, and troubleshooting expert assistance. Because this is a sophisticated technology, and the applications are ever growing. So we want to really make it automated in terms of how this technology can be used for all these new applications. So all of those are coming together. We believe we are unique in that aspect, and we have a lot of trials going on right now, and totally excited about it.
That's fantastic. If people want to learn more about Solona or more about CBRS, where would you recommend they go?
Awesome. The best place is to go to our website, solona.io, and we strongly recommend that they subscribe to our newsletter. And in the next few weeks, we'll have a bunch of announcements coming where we will describe our community development program, and I'll be personally involved in that. Andrew, Özer, and a bunch of other people will be also involved. And we're looking forward to that community building that's happening very soon.
Fantastic. I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you
Awesome.
so much for your time
Thank
today.
you.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. It sounds like some very exciting stuff coming from Solona.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ben.
And that's all the time that we have today. I want to thank you for joining us here at the Wireless LAN Professionals Conference. Stay tuned. We will be coming from some more conferences down the road. But for right now, I'm Ben Friedman. For everyone here in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, we'll see you next time on Live Now.